Hey, hi. Come in, get comfortable. Grab your blanket, your pillow, maybe a little cup of tea if you have one nearby. I'm so glad you're here tonight. So, I want to tell you a story. And fair warning, it's the kind of story that a lot of you are going to recognize. Like maybe a little too much. And that's kind of the point. Picture this. You meet someone, and from basically the very first conversation, this person is just magnetic. They say all the right things. They ask about your dreams. They lean in close and they go, "You know what I think about, like, all the time? Having a little house with a big back garden. Maybe a dog. 2 dogs, actually." And you're sitting there thinking, wait, that's exactly what I want. How does he know that? And the answer, honey, is that he doesn't.
Not yet.
But we'll get to that. He's the guy who brings up when we have kids on the 3rd date. The 3rd date. You haven't even figured out if you like how he'd choose yet, and this man is already naming hypothetical children. He talks about the Italy trip before he's even met your friends. He's drawing a whole picture of a future, a really, really beautiful picture, and you are standing there, heart full, thinking, finally, someone who sees where I'm going. This is a story about future faking. And if that term is new to you, don't worry, we're going to get really deep into it tonight. Because it's one of those things that once you learn to see it, you cannot unsee it. So, let's start at the beginning. Because the beginning is always the good part, right? That's the trap. When you first meet a future faker, it does not feel like a trap. It feels like an arrival. Like you've been wandering around this big, noisy dating world for a while, kissing frogs, going on mediocre dinners, swiping through people who can barely hold a conversation, and then this person walks in, and they are just different. They listen. They remember details. They text back. They talk about the future, like it's a place the two of you are going to together. And I want to be really clear about something right now. In the beginning, it feels genuinely magical. There's a term for that phase called new relationship energy. It's basically the honeymoon high. And some people, especially emotionally immature people, they get so caught up in that high, so swept up in the dopamine of it all, that they start making promises they have absolutely zero capacity to keep. Not because they're evil. Sometimes it's because they genuinely believe it in the moment. They feel so good, so hopeful, so this is the one, that the words just fall out. I want to take you to Tuscany. Sure, why not? I've never been. I feel amazing right now. I've always wanted a dog, just like yours. Do you though?
Do you really?
I can't wait for you to meet my family. When though? And here's the thing. Here's the painful, maddening, sleep-ruining thing. The words feel so real. Because he's looking you right in the eyes when he says them. His voice is warm. His arms are around you. It would be almost rude not to believe him. Now, I want to break down why this actually happens. Because I think when we understand the why, it becomes a little easier to stop blaming ourselves for falling for it. And a lot of us blame ourselves. So, let's get into it. Reason 1, the hook. Some people, and I want to be fair here, some people use future faking as a very deliberate, very calculated tool to get something from you in the present. That could be your emotional investment, your loyalty, your time, sometimes even money. By dangling this gorgeous, shining version of a future in front of you, they bypass the whole slow and natural build of real trust. They skip straight to the part where you're committed, where you'd feel guilty leaving. It's clever, honestly, in the most frustrating way possible. Reason 2, the honeymoon high we just talked about. Emotionally immature people ride that wave. The dopamine hits so hard that in the moment, they actually believe what they're saying. The problem is that eventually the dopamine levels off. And what's left is just a guy who promised you Tuscany and now can't seem to show up to plans he made 2 days ago. Reason 3, avoiding a breakup. Oh, this one. This one is what I call the carrot of behavioral change. You've had enough. You tell him you're thinking about leaving. Maybe you're tired of the drinking, or the temper, or the constant last-minute cancellations. And suddenly, he is the most motivated, reformed, emotionally available man you have ever encountered. He's going to start therapy. He bought a journal. He's looking at savings accounts online. He's not planning a future. He is trying to stop you from walking out the door. And there is a very, very important difference between those two things. Okay, reason 4. And this one is genuinely the sneakiest. It's called mirroring. And it is the twin flame trap. Here's how it works. You're having one of those early conversations where you feel so connected, right? And you mention something personal, something that really matters to you. Maybe you say, honestly, my dream is to one day have a little house somewhere quiet, outside the city, with a big kitchen and a dog named something ridiculous like Barnaby. And without missing a beat, he says, oh my God, that is literally my dream too. I've always wanted that. I've actually been looking at areas outside the city. And you feel this thing, this deep click of recognition, like the universe just handed you your person. But here's what's actually happening. He's mirroring. He is reflecting your own dreams back to you like a very handsome mirror. He's not sharing his truth. He's learning yours and using it to make you feel seen. It's extraordinarily effective because our deepest desires are also our deepest soft spots. And reason 5, the long-distance version. This one deserves its own conversation because future faking in long-distance relationships is, honestly, its own level. You have someone dangling a visa, a move date, a job transfer, always just around the corner. I've been looking at flights. I'm talking to my boss about working remotely. Just give me until summer. And summer comes and goes. And the new date is fall. And then the new year. And you have reorganized your entire emotional life around a timeline that only exists in conversation. Now, I want to talk about the FOG. Because if you've ever been in this situation, you know the fog very well, even if you didn't have a name for it. FOG stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. And it is the emotional atmosphere that future faking creates around you. Very slowly, without you really noticing, until one day you look up and you can't see clearly in any direction. The fear part is this low, constant hum of anxiety. You're always waiting to see if this time he'll follow through. Waiting to see if the Italy trip gets mentioned again or quietly buried. You check your phone a little too much. You read into things. Did he mean it when he said, when we eventually move in? Was that a real when, or was it just words? Your nervous system is on alert. Not because something terrible has happened, but because nothing has happened. And the nothing is somehow worse. The obligation part creeps in when you've been waiting long enough that leaving feels impossible. You've built your life around these promises. You've maybe told your friends about the trip. Maybe turned down other opportunities because you thought things were progressing. Maybe even quietly rearranged your whole vision of the next few years. Now, leaving feels like admitting it was all for nothing. And that feels like failure. And then the guilt. Oh, the guilt. Because when you bring it up, when you finally sit him down and say, hey, you know that thing you said about moving? Can we actually talk about that? He gets this look. Hurt.
Surprised.
Like you've wounded him by expecting him to be accountable for his own words. And suddenly you're apologizing for bringing up a promise he made. That is a special kind of disorienting. I want to share something from the research because it genuinely blew my mind a little when I read it. Studies actually show that the people most likely to make big promises in relationships aren't cynical manipulators. They're often people with really positive feelings about the relationship. People who are excited, who feel good, who want to please you. But they lack the self-regulation to follow through once that initial rush fades. So there's this whole category of future fakers who are not bad people. They're just emotionally immature. They feel everything very intensely in the moment and very little once the moment has passed. They meant it when they said it, They just have the follow-through capacity of a very enthusiastic golden retriever puppy who has already moved on to the next thing. And that's almost harder to deal with, honestly, because you can't be angry at them the way you could be angry at someone who is being deliberately cruel. But the damage to your heart is exactly the same.
Now,
Here's what I actually want you to take away tonight, because this is the part that matters. The first tool is something called the doubling rule.
and it is simple.
It is elegant. It will save you so much heartache. The idea is this: limit your planning and your emotional investment to the length of time you've actually known someone. If you've been dating for 2 months, don't let yourself get swept into conversations about 5 years from now. That's not cynicism. That's just protecting your own timeline. Because real intimacy isn't built on grand speeches. It's built on consistency. Small things. Does he show up when he says he will? Does he text back when he says he will? Because if he can't manage the small stuff, he is absolutely not managing a mortgage and a life with you. The second tool I want to give you is so small but so powerful. Start listening for the word when versus if. A future faker will almost always use when. Because when implies a guaranteed reality. When we get a place together. When we do this trip. When you meet my sister. It creates this artificial certainty. This sense of inevitability. And it bypasses your critical thinking because it sounds like it's already decided. But a person who genuinely wants a future with you, a grounded, real, emotionally available person, they use if. Because if acknowledges that you are two separate humans who are still figuring each other out. If we decide to move in together, we'd need to look at our finances. If we go to Italy, I want to make sure we do the Amalfi Coast. If asks for your input, when just tells you a story. And the third tool, the list. I know, it sounds very spreadsheet-y for what we're discussing. But hear me out. Take a piece of paper or your notes app. Write down every significant promise he's made in one column. The Italy trip, the savings account,
Starting therapy.
looking at apartments, moving cities, whatever your version of that list looks like. And in the second column, write the actual evidence. What steps, if any, has he actually taken? For most people going through this, that second column is heartbreakingly empty. And seeing it written out like that in your own handwriting on an actual page breaks the spell. Because it's no longer just a feeling you can't quite articulate. It's a fact. And you can hold a fact. I also want to talk about what your body already knows. Because this is something that comes up again and again when people share their experiences of future faking. They say, I knew something was off. I just couldn't explain it. And they're right. They did know. There's something that researchers describe as your nervous system recognizing a pattern before your brain consciously catches up. And it shows up physically. You feel this low background anxiety. Sleep that's lighter than it should be. A kind of vigilance you can't turn off. That slightly too good to be true flutter in your chest that sits right next to the butterflies but feels different. There's a very important question to ask yourself in those moments. And it's this: do I feel safe? Or do I just feel excited? Because those two things can wear almost identical costumes in the beginning of a relationship. Excitement and anxiety actually have similar signatures in your body. Your heart beats faster for both. You think about the person constantly for both. But one of those things is grounded. And one of those things is your nervous system quietly raising its hand. I remember reading about someone who shared their story of being in a relationship where her partner, who was quite publicly known in his field, kept promising to introduce her to people in his life. Always after this one big work thing. And then there was always another big work thing. For 3 years. 3 years of being a secret. 3 years of fighting to be seen as part of his life. And she said she knew. She always knew. She just wanted the version of him from those early conversations so much that she kept choosing to believe the words over the evidence. Let's talk about the red flags, the specific ones, because I think it helps to have them named clearly so that when you see them, they don't just feel like a bad feeling. They feel like information. The first one is the twin flame mirroring we talked about. If someone magically, perfectly, suspiciously shares 100% of your dreams, values, and even weirdly specific niche interests within the first month of knowing you, they're almost certainly building a mirror, not a relationship. Real people disagree with you sometimes. Real people say, I've never actually thought about that, or I don't know, I've always been more of a city person. Real alignment has friction. Fake alignment is seamless and immediate and slightly too perfect. The second red flag is the shared reality mirage. This is the version where he's all in on the planning energy, but nothing has any actual structure. He wants to make a shared Pinterest board for the apartment. He's looking at honeymoon destinations online with you. He's sending you photos of the kind of dog he wants to get. But there is never a budget conversation. Never a real timeline. Never a, so let's actually sit down and figure out the steps. The fantasy has all the aesthetic and none of the architecture. The third red flag, vague timelines. Everything is soon. Everything is someday. Everything is just give me until after this thing. Real plans have dates. Real plans have logistics. Real plans sometimes get adjusted, but they have a skeleton. If the closest thing to a timeline you ever get is when the time is right, that time is never coming. And somewhere under all your hope, you already know that. And the last red flag I want to name tonight, and I think this one is actually the most telling, is inconsistency in small things. Because we spend so much time focused on the big promises. The Italy trip, the ring, the moving in together. We're watching those things so closely, waiting to see if they materialize. But what we should be watching is whether he calls when he says he will, whether he texts back within a reasonable time, whether when he says, I'll be there at 7, he is there at 7. Character is behavior over time. That's really all it is. And a person who can't manage to follow through on the small, daily, ordinary stuff is not going to suddenly find a whole new level of reliability when the stakes are higher. That's not how people work. That's not how character works. If he can't text you back like a person, he is not managing a life with you. I know that's a simple thing to say, but sometimes the simple things are the ones we most need to hear out loud. Now, I want to sit with the metaphor that I love the most for explaining all of this, because I think it captures something that all the psychological terminology in the world can't quite touch. Imagine someone shows you a beautifully rendered architectural model of a mansion. It is perfect. Every detail. The garden. The light. The rooms. You can almost smell the flowers through the rendering. You can imagine yourself in every single room. And you get so excited. You start planning which room would be yours, and where you'd put your books, and what you'd plant in the garden. But then you go to the actual construction site. And there is no foundation, no wood, no materials, no building permit, just an empty lot and a very convincing screen. That is what being future faked feels like. You've been paying the mortgage on a house that was never built. You've been organizing your whole inner life around rooms that don't exist. And the cruelest part is that the rendering was so beautiful, of course you believed it. Anyone would have believed it. And this is something I really need you to hear before we close tonight. The fact that you believed him does not make you naive. It does not make you weak. It does not mean you should have known better. It means you are a person who is capable of love, who is capable of hope, who wants to build something real with someone. And those are not flaws. Those are gifts. The responsibility for making promises he had no intention of keeping, that belongs entirely to him. Not to you. Not to your hope. Not to your love. His. And healing from something like this is real work. It looks like grieving, actually grieving, the future you were promised. Because you did lose something. Not just the relationship. You lost the life you had already started to imagine. That image of yourself in the Italian countryside. The dog named Barnaby. The kitchen with the big windows. That was real to you. And it deserves to be mourned. And then slowly, gently, you start building again. On your own terms. With your own timeline. Your own goals. Your own little list of things that are actually true, that you are actually working toward. And nobody can take that from you. Because it's built on something real. Something with actual foundations. Something you laid yourself. So what does the real thing look like? Because I don't want to leave you just knowing what to run away from. I want you to know what to run toward. The real thing is, honestly, kind of quiet at first. It doesn't have the fireworks of the Future Fakers opening act. It doesn't sweep you off your feet in week one with talk of Tuscany and twin flames. It builds. Slowly and consistently and a little mundanely, which is actually the most romantic thing in the world once you know what you're looking at. The real thing is someone who says if. Who factors you into decisions without taking over your autonomy. Who calls when they say they will, not every single time because they're human, but in a pattern that makes you feel stable. Who when they make a plan books the restaurant. Who when they talk about the future includes logistics. Who is not afraid to say, I don't know yet, rather than filling the uncertainty with gorgeous words that lead nowhere. The real thing is someone who shows up in the present, not someone who keeps you living in this someday. Because someday is not a place. You cannot actually live there. You can only visit, briefly, in imagination. And then you have to come back to Tuesday. And Tuesday is where your life actually is. You deserve someone who is with you on Tuesday. Someone who brings their actual self, not their best-case fantasy self, to the ordinary days. Someone who does not just promise to help dig the foundation someday. Someone who is there in their work clothes on a regular weekend, ready to actually get their hands in the dirt with you. And so, as you're drifting off tonight, I want you to hold on to something. If you've been through this, if you've been the person waiting, the person who kept a list of promises in her head and kept checking it and finding it unchanged. The person who told herself just a little longer, just until after this one thing. The person who loved a future that existed only in words. You are not broken. You are not too much. You did not ask for too much. You asked for what love is supposed to be. Consistent. Present.
Real.
And you deserve every single piece of that. And maybe tonight, as you're falling asleep, instead of replaying the conversations and the promises and the beautiful rendering of the life that never got built, you let yourself imagine the version of you who doesn't need to chase it anymore, who isn't waiting for a text to know she's loved, who isn't decoding when versus if, who has decided that she is not available to live in someday. Who has quietly, firmly chosen the present, chosen herself, chosen real. She's not bitter. She's actually really peaceful because she stopped paying the mortgage on a house that was never going to be built, and she bought her own little plot of land. And she is building something entirely her own. And it is beautiful. And it is hers. I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well, okay? You deserve a really good rest tonight. All of you.